The year was 1907, early spring in the remote mountain settlement of Cottonwood Hollow, Utah Territory, a place where the wind carried whispers through valleys carved by ancient waters, where the shadow of Mount Timpanogos loomed over scattered homesteads like a silent guardian of secrets. The territorial records show that 4 women lived on the Blackwood property: Sarah, Eliza, Ruth, and Mary Blackwood, all listed as the legal wives of Joseph Blackwood, a prominent figure in the local religious community. This arrangement, while certainly not unprecedented in the region at that time, was not what it appeared to be. The territorial census taker had noted something peculiar during his April visit. All 4 women appeared to be in various stages of pregnancy. Joseph had been away on business in Salt Lake City for nearly 11 months prior. The census taker's private journal, discovered decades later in a forgotten archive at the University of Utah, contains a single line regarding his visit to the Blackwood property. Something unsettling in the air at the Blackwood place. The women seem afraid. JB returned unexpectedly during my counting, his eyes when looking upon his wives, cold as winter stone. What transpired over the following 17 days in that remote corner of Utah would shock even the most hardened investigators of the territorial police force. By May 1, 1907, all 4 Blackwood wives would be dead, their bodies discovered in a cave system beneath the property. Joseph Blackwood would vanish, his whereabouts unknown until a chance discovery in 1932 would finally reveal the horrifying truth of what occurred in those blood-soaked spring days of 1907. The investigation began with a telegram sent by Dr. William Harrison, the nearest physician, located some 20 miles from Cottonwood Hollow. The telegram, preserved in the Territorial Records Office, reads, 4 deceased females, stop Blackwood property, stop advanced pregnancy, all cases, stop suspicious circumstances, stop require immediate territorial police presence, stop. The telegram was received by Captain Thomas Reed of the Utah Territorial Police on May 3, 1907. Reed's investigation journal provides the foundation for much of what we know about the initial stages of this case. Arrived Cottonwood Hollow May 4th, met with Dr. Harrison at the Blackwood property. Scene unlike anything previously encountered in 15 years of police work. Evidence suggests systematic elimination of victims over a period of approximately 2 weeks. No sign of Joseph Blackwood. Local search parties organized. The Blackwood property sat at the edge of Cottonwood Hollow, a substantial homestead of 80 acres, with a main house, 2 outbuildings, and a root cellar that, as investigators would discover, connected to a natural cave system extending beneath the property. The main house, built in 1891 according to county records, was a 2-story structure with 8 rooms, unusually large for the area and time. Joseph Blackwood had acquired considerable wealth through his interests in silver mining and railroad investments. The 4 wives lived in relative comfort, each with private quarters within the main house. Local accounts suggest that the Blackwood wives were rarely seen in town together, instead taking turns to purchase supplies and attend to business. Sarah Blackwood, the first wife, had married Joseph in 1892. Territorial marriage records indicate she was 19 at the time of the marriage. Eliza joined the household in 1895, Ruth in 1898, and Mary, the youngest, in 1901. By 1907, the women ranged in age from 24 to 34 years old. All were described in local accounts as educated, refined, and devoted to their shared husband. This public perception, however, concealed a much darker reality within the walls of the Blackwood home. The investigation uncovered that Joseph Blackwood had departed for business in Salt Lake City in May 1906, leaving his 4 wives at the homestead. His business dealings, ostensibly related to mining investments, required his presence in the territorial capital for an extended period. During this absence, the Blackwood wives continued their quiet existence in Cottonwood Hollow. Their interactions with the small community remained minimal, though several witnesses later reported to Captain Reed that the women seemed lighter in spirit during this period. Emma Wilson, the general store proprietor, noted in her statement to investigators, "The Blackwood women smiled more, laughed even, particularly when Thomas Jenkins would make his deliveries to their property." Thomas Jenkins, 30 years old in 1907, operated the mail and supply route between Salt Lake City and the outlying settlements. His regular route brought him to Cottonwood Hollow twice monthly. Jenkins delivered not only mail and ordered supplies, but also served as a vital connection to the outside world for remote homesteads. According to Emma Wilson's statement, Jenkins began making notably more frequent stops at the Blackwood property beginning in July 1906, approximately 2 months after Joseph Blackwood's departure. Dr. Harrison's medical records, reluctantly shared with investigators, revealed that all 4 Blackwood wives had visited his practice separately between August and October of 1906. Each consultation was regarding the confirmation of pregnancy. Dr. Harrison noted that all 4 women requested absolute confidentiality regarding their condition. His records contain a disturbing observation regarding Mary Blackwood's October visit. Patient exhibits unusual anxiety. When questioned about husband's reaction to pregnancy, became agitated and stated, "He must never know. None of them are his." This revelation provides the first documented suggestion of what would become the central element in this tragic case, that all 4 Blackwood wives had become involved with Thomas Jenkins during Joseph Blackwood's absence, and all 4 had become pregnant as a result of these liaisons. The territorial census takers' April 1907 observation of the women's pregnancies coincided with what would have been their 3rd trimester, based on Dr. Harrison's records. Joseph Blackwood's unexpected return to Cottonwood Hollow was documented in the ledger of the Silver Summit Hotel in Salt Lake City, where he checked out on April 10, 1907, nearly a month earlier than his previously stated intention. No records exist of his journey back to Cottonwood Hollow, but multiple witness statements confirm his presence at the homestead by April 12th. The census takers' encounter with him occurred on April 13th. What transpired within the Blackwood home following Joseph's return must be reconstructed through forensic evidence and fragmented accounts. Captain Reed's investigation journal describes the scene discovered on May 2nd when Dr. Harrison was summoned to the property by a concerned neighbor who had received no response when attempting to deliver a package. Main house in immaculate condition, no immediate signs of violence or struggle. 4 bedrooms show evidence of occupation, but personal items missing. Root cellar door secured with new padlock. Upon gaining entry to cellar, discovered access to natural cave system. Followed approximately 60 yards to chamber containing the remains of 4 females, identified as the Blackwood wives by distinctive personal effects. Dr. Harrison's subsequent examination of the remains provides a clinical but deeply disturbing account of the final fate of the Blackwood wives. Each woman had been killed by different means. Sarah, the first wife, showed evidence of poisoning, likely by arsenic based on post-mortem symptoms. Eliza had been strangled, the bruising pattern suggesting a prolonged struggle. Ruth had suffered blunt force trauma to the skull, while Mary, the youngest, had died from exsanguination due to a precise incision across the throat. All 4 women had been killed while still pregnant, and Dr. Harrison's examination confirmed that none of the pregnancies had been terminated prior to death. The systematic nature of the killings, coupled with the careful concealment of the bodies, suggested a calculated approach rather than a crime of sudden passion. Captain Reed's investigation established a probable timeline based on witness accounts of having seen or heard the Blackwood wives at different times following Joseph's return. Sarah was likely killed on April 14th or 15th, Eliza around April 19th, Ruth approximately April 24th, and Mary, the last to die, around April 28th. During this period, Joseph Blackwood was observed in Cottonwood Hollow by multiple witnesses. Emma Wilson's statement describes an interaction on April 20th. Mr. Blackwood purchased supplies as normal. When I inquired after Mrs. Sarah's health, as she typically made the Saturday purchases, he replied that she was indisposed with female troubles. He smiled when saying this, but the smile never reached his eyes. He purchased unusual quantities of lye and quicklime, claiming spring cleaning was underway at the homestead. The most revealing evidence of Joseph Blackwood's state of mind during this period comes from the journal of Reverend Isaiah Palmer of the Cottonwood Hollow Chapel. Blackwood had visited the Reverend on April 17th, between the likely dates of the first and second murders. Palmer's journal entry reads, "Joseph Blackwood called upon me today in a state of religious fervor I have not previously observed in him. He spoke at length about the biblical punishment for adultery and the purification of bloodlines. His interpretation of Scripture was most disturbing, focusing extensively on Exodus 20:14 and Leviticus 20:10. When I attempted to guide him toward messages of mercy and forgiveness, he became agitated, stating that mercy is God's privilege, but the execution of justice falls to man. I fear his time away has disturbed his mind. As the investigation progressed, the focus shifted to locating Joseph Blackwood, who had vanished from Cottonwood Hollow by May 1st. The last confirmed sighting came from Jeremiah Hobbs, a rancher whose property adjoined the Blackwood homestead. Hobbs reported seeing Blackwood on the evening of April 30th, loading several trunks into his wagon before departing eastward. A territory-wide alert was issued, but no trace of Joseph Blackwood was found in the immediate aftermath. Thomas Jenkins, upon being questioned by Captain Reed, revealed that he had been engaged in a romantic relationship with Mary Blackwood since June 1906. He initially denied involvement with the other wives, but when confronted with evidence from Dr. Harrison's records, admitted to intimate relationships with all four women. Jenkins's statement to investigators portrays a complex dynamic. It began with Mary. She was so lonely, so desperate for tenderness. Then Ruth approached me during a delivery in July. By August, Eliza had made her intentions clear as well. Sarah was last, sometime in late August. They knew about each other. They had formed a kind of sisterhood in their shared secret. They spoke of leaving together once the babies came, of finding a place far from Utah where they could live without scrutiny. They feared Joseph's return. Not without reason, it seems. Jenkins was held briefly as a person of interest, but was released due to alibis confirming his presence on his mail route during the period when the murders occurred. His role in the tragedy was that of catalyst rather than perpetrator, though the psychological impact of the events left him deeply affected. Historical records indicate Jenkins left the Utah Territory by the end of 1907, relocating to Oregon where he lived until his death in 1951. The case of the Blackwood wives might have remained an unsolved mystery in territorial records had it not been for an accidental discovery in 1932. A geological survey team exploring mining possibilities in northern Arizona came upon an isolated cabin in the Kaibab Plateau region. Inside, they discovered the remains of a man later identified through documentation as Joseph Blackwood. The cabin contained numerous journals and papers spanning the 25 years following the Blackwood wives' murders. These journals, now preserved in the Utah State Historical Society archives, provide a disturbing glimpse into the mind of Joseph Blackwood during and after the murders. The earliest entry, dated April 13, 1907, reads, "Returned to find abomination in my house. 4 wives, 4 betrayals, 4 unholy seeds. The census man saw it in their bodies and in my eyes. He knows but will not speak. No matter. The cleansing has begun with Sarah. She confessed after minimal persuasion, named the mail carrier as defiler of my bloodline, said the others had similarly fallen, confirmation of what I suspected upon seeing their swollen bellies. Sarah now rests in the cave, the first purification complete. Subsequent entries detail each murder with clinical precision, revealing a methodical approach driven by religious fanaticism and possessive rage. Blackwood wrote of conducting interviews with each wife before their execution, extracting confessions and details of their relationship with Jenkins. His April 28th entry regarding Mary, the last wife to be killed, is particularly disturbing. The youngest betrayer required the most direct approach. Unlike the others, she showed no remorse, instead speaking of love and dreams of escape. Claimed the child was a blessing, not an abomination. Such heresy could only be cleansed with the blade. As her lifeblood flowed, I placed my hand upon the movement in her womb, feeling it weaken and cease. 2 corruptions ended with 1 righteous act. Following the murders, Blackwood's journals document his journey through remote regions of Utah, Colorado, New Mexico, and eventually Arizona. He avoided populated areas, supporting himself through hunting, occasional prospecting, and infrequent trading at isolated outposts where he used assumed names. His writings become increasingly detached from reality over the years, filled with religious visions and conversations with his deceased wives, whom he claimed visited him nightly to beg forgiveness for their transgressions. The final journal entry, dated January 18, 1932, suggests Blackwood had become aware of his impending death. The wives came again last night, not as supplicants, but as harbingers. They wore white, their bellies round with the unholy seed. They said the time of judgment approaches. I am prepared to stand before the ultimate tribunal and defend my necessary actions. The bloodline remains pure, unstained by the mail carrier's corruption. This shall be counted in my favor when the scales of divine justice are balanced. Forensic examination of Blackwood's remains indicated he had died approximately 2 weeks before discovery, likely from a combination of advanced age, he would have been in his late 60s, and exposure to severe winter conditions. A detail noted by the survey team was the presence of 4 locks of hair, each tied with different colored ribbons, found clutched in Blackwood's hand at the time of discovery. The case of the Blackwood wives' murders provides a disturbing glimpse into the dark undercurrents that could exist beneath the surface of remote religious communities in early territorial Utah. While polygamous arrangements were not uncommon in certain sects at the time, the Blackwood case reveals how such structures could become vehicles for control, possessiveness, and ultimately violence when that control was threatened. The psychological dimensions of the case have been examined by various scholars in the decades since. The isolation of the Blackwood wives, their geographical and social removal from broader society, created conditions where their shared secret became a bond of sisterhood and potential liberation. Their plans to escape together with their children represents an early example of women creating alternative family structures in response to oppressive circumstances. Joseph Blackwood's descent into religious mania and murderous vengeance illustrates how scriptural interpretation, without temperance or context, can become a justification for the most heinous actions. His journals reveal a man who viewed his wives not as autonomous individuals, but as extensions of himself and his bloodline, their pregnancies by another man representing not just personal betrayal, but spiritual contamination that required cleansing. Thomas Jenkins, the mail carrier whose relationships with the Blackwood wives precipitated the tragedy, represents a complex figure in the narrative. Neither hero nor villain, Jenkins provided the emotional connection and possibility of escape that the women sought, yet his involvement with all 4 created the very situation that would lead to their deaths. His subsequent flight from the territory suggests a man haunted by the unintended consequences of his actions. Perhaps most poignant are the unborn children, 5 in total as one wife was carrying twins, according to Dr. Harrison's examination. These lives, extinguished before beginning, represent the ultimate innocent victims of the tragedy. Blackwood's journals reveal his belief that by killing the pregnant women, he was preventing the birth of contaminated children who would taint his family line. This perverse logic, rooted in concepts of bloodline purity and patriarchal ownership, demonstrates how dangerous such ideologies could become when taken to their extreme. The discovery of human remains in 1954 during construction near the former Blackwood property added a final, chilling coda to the case. Workers excavating for a new road uncovered a small bundle buried approximately 3 feet below ground. Forensic examination identified the remains as those of an infant estimated to have been born in late 1906 or early 1907. A silver pendant found with the remains matched the description of a family heirloom belonging to Eliza Blackwood, suggesting the child may have been born to her and secretly buried before Joseph's return. This discovery raises the possibility that at least one of the Blackwood wives successfully delivered a child from her relationship with Jenkins, and that this child was hidden or perished before Joseph's return in April 1907. No mention of this child appears in any of the known documentation from the case, including Blackwood's otherwise detailed journals. The tragic case of the Blackwood wives has been largely forgotten in the broader history of the Utah Territory, overshadowed by the more prominent narratives of religious settlement and economic development. Yet it stands as a stark reminder of the vulnerabilities women faced in isolated communities, the dangerous power of religious fanaticism when used to justify violence, and the desperate lengths to which people might go to escape suffocating circumstances. The cave system where the Blackwood wives' remains were discovered has since been sealed by natural geological processes, accessible only through specialized equipment. The Blackwood property itself changed hands multiple times before being abandoned in the 1940s. Today, the land where the tragedy unfolded appears unremarkable, a quiet stretch of terrain gradually reclaimed by the natural landscape of Utah's mountain regions. Yet beneath the surface, both literally and figuratively, lies a dark chapter in the territory's history, A reminder that even in places of apparent tranquility, human passion, possessiveness, and violence can erupt with devastating consequences. The journals of Joseph Blackwood remain in the archives of the Utah State Historical Society, preserved as documents of historical significance despite their disturbing content. They serve as primary source material for researchers studying the psychological aspects of religious extremism, domestic violence in isolated communities, and the complex social dynamics of polygamous arrangements in territorial Utah. Access to these materials is restricted to qualified researchers, requiring special permission and scholarly justification. In the scattered graves across Utah, Arizona, and the unmarked cave that became their tomb, the Blackwood wives and their unborn children lie as silent witnesses to a tragedy born of control, betrayal, and the dangerous intersection of religious fervor and possessive rage. Their story, reconstructed from fragmented records, forensic evidence, and the disturbing journals of their killer, serves as a somber reminder of how isolation and extremism can create the perfect conditions for tragedy, and how the desire for freedom can lead to both desperate actions and devastating consequences. The wind still blows through Cottonwood Hollow, now a ghost of a settlement absorbed by expanding nearby towns. It carries no memory of the events of those 17 days in spring 1907, no echo of the final conversations between Joseph Blackwood and his doomed wives, no whisper of plans for escape that would never be realized. Yet the story remains preserved in yellowing documents and academic analyses, a dark footnote in the complex history of the American frontier, where the promise of new beginnings sometimes led instead to bloody endings.